You don't belong here." The words hit harder than the steel gate looming behind him. The woman's voice cut across the quiet suburban morning like a whip, sharp enough to draw eyes from the houses nearby. She jabbed a manicured finger toward him, lips curling with triumph. At the gate of a mansion he owned, a black man in a gray, sleeveless shirt stood still, hands relaxed at his sides. The word humanity stretched across his chest, but no one seemed to read it. Not the two officers at his flanks, smirking like they'd already judged the outcome. Not the private guard who shifted nervously but didn't move aside. And certainly not the woman in white, her heels clicking against the pavement as she stepped closer. "Cry, baby," she sneered, loud enough for her echo to travel beyond the iron bars. "Security, get this man out of here before he scares the neighbors." The taller officer grinned. "Step back, sir. Trespassing here is a felony." But he didn't step back. His frame didn't tremble. He simply breathed in, steady, anchoring himself like a stone at the center of their storm. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now back to him." A neighbor leaned over a second-floor balcony, phone already in hand. "What's going on?" she whispered to herself, as if narrating for the live stream she hadn't yet started. The CEO, though no one knew it yet, kept his gaze forward, eyes fixed on the closed gate. He had walked this path 100 times. Tonight, he planned to walk it differently. No convoy, no suit, no watch worth more than their annual salary. Just sweat from a morning workout and sneakers that squeaked faintly on the asphalt. The shorter officer pulled at his cuffs, testing the metal with a snap. "Don't make us put these on you, man. You'll spend the night in county." Still, no movement. Only words, calm and clipped. "Run my name." The woman in white laughed, head thrown back. "His name won't be in your system. People like him don't live here." Phones tilted higher. The delivery guy on a scooter slowed, eyes wide, lens recording. The tension wasn't confined to the gate anymore. It spilled down the street, thickening the air, pressing into every witness. What they saw was a man accused of being an intruder at the mansion he paid for. What they didn't see, not yet, was the storm about to turn. The man at the gate wasn't dressed for power. No silk tie, no watch gleaming like a trophy, no convoy of black SUVs waiting at the curb. Just a sleeveless gray shirt that read humanity, sweat darkened from the gym, and sneakers that had carried him through miles before the sun rose. To the officers, he looked like a stranger out of place. To the woman in white, he looked like a target. But appearances were the point. For years, he had moved through spaces where judgment arrived before introductions. At 24, he walked into a luxury dealership with cash in hand and was asked to step aside so real buyers could be served first. At 30, he entered a hotel lobby in Boston and heard the same line, "This area is for guests only." And now, standing in front of the mansion he built brick by brick through deals, acquisitions, and nights without sleep, the cycle returned. The estate stretched behind the gates 12,000 square feet of marble, glass, and steel. The lawn rolled wide, trimmed with precision, fountains catching the light like liquid crystal. It wasn't just a home, it was a statement carved into land that once denied him access. But none of that mattered to the officers clutching their belts. None of that mattered to the woman smirking at the cameras she knew were recording. One officer shifted closer, squinting at him as if muscles and sweat erased legitimacy. "You live here?" His tone wasn't curious. It was dismissive, the kind that already decided the answer. The man's reply was steady, a single word. "Yes." The woman laughed again, sharp and cutting. "Don't lie. Residents here don't walk up in gym clothes. He's pretending." The security guard by the keypad glanced down at the glowing panel, then back at the man. The system had already hesitated, flashing red before scanning him again. He saw the flicker but said nothing. Silence was safer. A delivery driver parked his scooter at the curb, helmet still on, phone angled discreetly. The scene looked like a stage set. Accuser, accused, guards ready to play their part. The mansion gate the backdrop, the word access glowing faintly overhead like a verdict waiting to be read. The man adjusted his stance. Not defensive, not submissive, balanced. Every inch of his calmness carried weight. He wasn't here to beg. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to watch how far their prejudice would carry them. Because behind those gates wasn't just property. Behind those gates was the truth. He wasn't trespassing. He was home. The taller officer tugged his belt, hand brushing the cuffs again. His partner stepped closer, narrowing the space between man and gate. The quiet of the morning fractured under their voices. "Sir, step back from the property," the younger one said, each word clipped, rehearsed. "This is a restricted community. You can't just walk in." The man's tone didn't rise. "I live here," the woman in white snorted, tossing her hair as though the sound itself were proof. "You? In this neighborhood? Look at him. He doesn't even have a key fob. He's trying to bluff." The security guard by the keypad shifted uneasily, but the hesitation lasted only a breath. He squared his shoulders, trying to mimic the officer's authority. "Name and ID," he barked. The man held his ground. "Run my name." The younger officer chuckled under his breath, a sound that wasn't amusement but dismissal. "We don't take instructions from you." He turned to the guard. "Get dispatch on the line. Trespasser at the west gate." The word trespasser hung heavy, like a stamp pressed on skin. Phones tilted higher. The delivery driver whispered into his mic, "They're calling him a trespasser at his own gate." The woman's voice rose sharper, slicing through the murmurs. "This is exactly what I told you. People like him sneak in, pretend they belong, and before you know it, houses get robbed." Her words drew gasps from a couple passing by on their morning walk. They slowed, eyes darting between her smug face and the man's steady stillness. The taller officer leaned forward, inches from the man's shoulder. "Listen, buddy, you can make this easy. Step aside, show us where you actually belong, and nobody gets hurt." Still calm, still grounded. "This is where I belong." The woman clapped once, mocking applause that echoed off the iron bars. "Bravo, he thinks this is his mansion. Next he'll say he owns the whole block." The guard tapped the keypad again, waiting for the red light to confirm what he already believed. It flickered, then steadied. "Access denied." He turned with a smirk. "Say, system doesn't recognize you. You're out." The younger officer's hand went to his radio. "Dispatch, we've got a non-compliant male refusing to leave, requesting backup." 2. A ripple went through the watching crowd. Backup meant escalation. Escalation meant violence. The man's breath stayed even, his silence louder than any protest. The storm was gathering, but he didn't move. He simply waited, because every insult, every threat, every false word they were building the very case that would undo them. The radio crackled on the younger officer's shoulder, static biting at the air, but the man at the gate didn't flinch. His stillness was a language of its own. No shouting, no pleading, just silence heavy enough to unnerve the people trying to erase him. The taller officer waved a hand in front of his face, irritated. "Did you hear me? Backup's on the way. You can cooperate now, or you can make this ugly." Nothing. Just a calm exhale, steady and measured, as if the cuffs dangling inches from his wrists were decorations, not threats. The woman's heels tapped against the pavement like a metronome of malice. "Oh, this is hilarious. He thinks if he stays quiet, he'll scare us. Sweetheart, silence doesn't make you rich. Silence doesn't buy you a house like this." She gestured toward the mansion rising behind the gates, her laughter sharp, shrill, meant to cut. But silence did cut. Because the longer he stood there without protest, the more uneasy the crowd became. The delivery driver lowered his phone for a moment, whispering to himself, "He's not resisting. He's not even talking back. Why do they look so nervous?" The security guard tapped the keypad again, frustrated that the red glow refused to shift. He barked, louder this time. "ID, show us something, anything." Slowly, deliberately, the man turned his gaze toward him, not with anger, but with patience. "Run my name," he said again, softer this time. The words landed differently now. They weren't a plea, they were a command wrapped in calm. The younger officer scoffed, but his jaw tightened. Something about that quiet voice rattled the confidence in his stance. The woman in white stepped closer, nearly brushing his shoulder. "You're wasting everyone's time. Admit it. You don't belong here." His eyes moved to her, steady, unblinking. No insult returned, no accusation thrown back. Just the silence of someone who knew more than she could imagine. It was the same silence he carried at 23, when a loan officer laughed in his face after demanding 3 forms of collateral. The same silence at 32, when a hotel clerk told him the penthouse was booked while handing keys to someone else minutes later. Silence wasn't weakness. It was witness. The officers didn't know it, but every second he refused to break, the balance of power was shifting. Not loud, not fast, but inevitable. The crowd whispered now, unease crawling through their voices. Why isn't he saying more? Why aren't they checking the system? This doesn't feel right. And still, he stood, silent, anchored, letting the storm spend itself before the lightning turned. A voice cut through the tension, not from the officers, not from the woman, but from the curb. This doesn't look right. The delivery driver had stepped off his scooter, phone angled high, its red recording light steady. His helmet was still half on, but his eyes were clear. He narrated almost without meaning to, as if the truth needed witnesses. He's not resisting. He's standing there. And they're calling him a trespasser. The taller officer snapped his head around. Put that phone away. The driver didn't. He took a step closer. Nah, people should see this. From the second-floor balcony, the neighbor raised her own phone. Her voice carried down the street. What's his crime? Wearing gym clothes? Walking home? She shook her head, disbelief spilling into anger. The woman in white scoffed, but her laugh came thinner now. Don't encourage this circus. He doesn't belong here. Another passerby slowed his jog, earbuds pulled free. What's happening? He asked no one in particular, but the answer came quick from the woman, sharp and venomous. An intruder, pretending to own what isn't his. The jogger frowned. Doesn't look like an intruder. He looks like someone waiting for sense to catch up. The crowd was growing. Not huge, not chaotic, but enough. Enough eyes, enough cameras, enough murmurs to shift the air. The younger officer tugged his radio again, irritation cracking through his tone. Dispatch, situation escalating, unauthorized mail, crowd forming. The man at the gate still hadn't moved. Stillness wrapping him like armor. His silence made every witness question louder, made every recorded second sharper. The driver's voice rose again. You sure about this? Because if you're wrong, the whole world's about to know it. The security guard faltered at the keypad, fingers hovering. He had worked this gate for years, knew the system wasn't perfect, knew a misread could happen. But under the woman's glare and the officer's posturing, he bit down on doubt. System says denied, that's enough for me. But it wasn't enough for the cameras. The neighbor's voice carried one more time, firmer now. Then maybe your system's wrong. The murmurs thickened into a hum, like the prelude to a verdict. Phones were watching. People were watching. And for the first time, the balance of silence and speech began to tilt. The man remained unmoved, his calm presence sharpening every word around him. He didn't need to raise his voice. Others were beginning to speak for him. And that was always the beginning of change. The younger officer pressed a hand to his radio, eyes darting to the small crowd that had gathered. Dispatch, we've got an unverified male refusing to comply. Possible fraud. Request immediate backup. The word fraud landed heavy. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was an accusation, broadcast over the airwaves, documented like a stain that clung. The woman in white clapped her hands once, sharp and mocking. They're at Island Fraud. Exactly what I said. He's trying to trick you. They always do. The taller officer stepped forward, posture squared like he was ready to detain. Sir, last chance. You show ID right now, or we move you off this property. The man at the gate didn't move. His voice quiet but clear. This is my property. The officer smirked, as if he'd heard the funniest joke of the morning. Yeah? Then where's your proof? You can't just say it. The woman echoed him, louder, eager to play to the growing crowd. Exactly. Where's your proof? He doesn't live here. He can't even open the gate. The guard by the keypad struck the panel again, triumphant when the red light blinked back. See? Denied. System doesn't lie. But the crowd was restless now. The delivery driver muttered into his phone. System's glitchy all the time. Doesn't mean he doesn't live here. The jogger folded his arms. Funny how the system never glitches for people who look like her. He nodded toward the woman in white, whose face flushed but not from shame, from fury. The neighbor on the balcony raised her voice again, louder this time. You're humiliating a man in front of his own house. The taller officer barked back. Ma'am, stay out of this. This is police business. The word humiliating stuck, clung, echoed in whispers through the small crowd. Phones tilted higher, recording not just the man's silence but the officer's aggression. The woman in white stepped closer, eyes glittering with contempt. He should be grateful you're not cuffing him already. If this were anywhere else, he'd be in the back of a cruiser. The man's jaw tightened, but his posture didn't shift. His silence carried the weight of memory dealership floors, hotel lobbies, countless rooms where he was dismissed before he was known. The jogger shook his head, voice cutting through the rising static. He hasn't raised his voice once, and you're treating him like a criminal. The taller officer snapped, because he is one until proven otherwise. Gasps scattered through the crowd. The line had been crossed, the insult laid bare, guilt assigned before identity confirmed. The man at the gate didn't flinch. He let the silence deepen, let their words hang heavier with every second, because the more they spoke, the more they condemned themselves. The storm was tightening. The air itself felt brittle, ready to break. And still, he stood anchored, patient, waiting for the fall. The younger officer's patience snapped first. He yanked the cuffs from his belt with a metallic snap that cut through the murmurs of the crowd. "Turn around," he ordered, stepping in close. "Hands behind your back. You're being detained." Gasps rippled outward, phones tilting higher to catch the moment. The delivery driver whispered into his mic, "They're cuffing him at his own gate." The woman in white's face lit up, triumph blazing across her features. She clapped again, mocking applause. "Finally! Took you long enough. Get him out of here before he scares the neighborhood kids." The taller officer joined in, moving to flank. "You're done, buddy. Don't make us drag you." Still, the man didn't move. His silence sharpened the spectacle, turned every shove of authority into theater. His calmness was the most dangerous witness in the room. The security guard stepped forward now, emboldened by the officers. He jabbed a finger toward the keypad, voice loud, rehearsed. "Access denied. That's the system. That's the law. You don't belong here." The younger officer grabbed at his wrist, pulling hard to force compliance. "I said turn around." The woman in white laughed, her voice shrill, cutting. Look at him, he thought he could walk right in, thought silence made him powerful. Now he's going to jail where he belongs. Her words echoed off the iron bars, but they didn't land the way she thought. The neighbor on the balcony shouted down, "This is wrong. He hasn't done anything." The jogger stepped closer, voice steady, eyes locked on the officers. "He said he lives here. Why won't you check? Why won't you run his name?" The taller officer barked back, "Because we don't have to. Fraud doesn't need verification." That word again, fraud, fired into the crowd like shrapnel. It was no longer suspicion. It was conviction without evidence. The younger officer shoved the cuffs against the man's wrist, metal cold against skin. "This is the last time I ask." But the man's voice, calm and low, cut through. "Touch me again and you'll regret it." The words weren't shouted. They weren't desperate. They were steady, deliberate, and heavier than steel. The crowd froze. Even the security guard hesitated, his smirk faltering. The woman in white scoffed, trying to reclaim the moment. "Empty threats. He's nothing but a trespasser in gym clothes. Arrest him already." But the longer he stood anchored, unbroken, the more their authority cracked. The cameras were rolling. The whispers were spreading. And every second their hands pushed closer to his wrists, the closer they came to their own undoing. The air wasn't calm anymore. It was charged like lightning waiting to split the sky. The cuffs were inches from closing when he moved. Not a struggle, not a shove. Just one hand, lifting with quiet precision, sliding into his pocket, pulling out a slim black phone. The younger officer barked, "Drop it, no calls." "Aye." But the man's thumb was already pressing one number, the screen lighting up with a single name. Elena, exec assistant. The line clicked before the first ring finished. Her voice came through, crisp, professional. "Yes, sir?" The man's tone didn't rise. Calm, steady. "Initiate Protocol 7. Gate access and ownership verification. Real time." The crowd stilled. The officers frowned. The woman in white burst into a laugh sharp enough to pierce glass. "Protocol? What is this, some Netflix drama? Call whoever you want. It won't save you." But the phone stayed live on speaker. Elena's response rang out for everyone to hear. "Confirmed. Executing Protocol 7. Linking biometric, deed records, and access control. Please stand by." The delivery driver lowered his phone for a beat, whispering to himself, "Wait." That sounded official. The taller officer sneered, masking unease. "Nice trick. You've got a friend to fake call. Doesn't change the fact you're trespassing." From the balcony, the neighbor leaned forward. "Then let's see what his system says." You keep saying he doesn't belong, why are you scared to check? The younger officer tightened his grip on the cuffs. Because systems don't lie. The security guard smacked the keypad again, desperate for validation. The red light blinked once, twice, but this time it froze. The panel hummed faintly, screen flickering as though overridden. Elena's voice returned, steady, deliberate. Verification in process. Stand by for ownership confirmation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones captured every second the officer's clenched jaw, the woman's eyes darting toward the gate, the guard's hand hovering uncertainly. The man lowered his phone, gaze fixed forward. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't gloating, he was simply waiting, anchored in the knowledge of what was already true. The woman hissed, her voice louder now, desperate. This is fake. He's faking it. Don't listen to him. People like him scam their way into places like this every day. But her words fell thinner this time, drowned beneath the hum of the system rebooting. The gate's LED screen, long red, flickered with new text, access override, pending verification. The jogger crossed his arms. Doesn't look fake to me. The younger officer's radio crackled again, dispatch asking for an update. His voice faltered for the first time. A situation developing. The delivery driver raised his phone higher, whispering to his unseen audience. He's not resisting. He's not running. He's proving. In real time. The storm was shifting, and they didn't even realize they were already standing in its eye. The keypad flickered again, no longer red. A low hum filled the air, louder than the officer's breath, louder than the woman's hissed protests. Then the gate's LED screen lit up with 4 words that silenced the street. Access granted owner profile. A name glowed across the steel panel, sharp and undeniable. CEO's name. The crowd gasped as if the letters themselves carried voltage. Phones zoomed in, capturing proof etched in light. The delivery driver whispered hoarsely into his mic. It just said, owner. He's the owner. The neighbor clutched her balcony rail, her voice trembling but loud enough to echo. That's his house. I told you. The younger officer froze, cuffs half raised, his grip faltering. His partner stepped back a single inch, disbelief breaking through his posture. No, that can't be right. The woman in white shook her head violently, blonde hair snapping across her face. Glitch. That's a glitch. He hacked it. People like him. But the words died in her throat when Elena's voice rang clear from the phone in his hand, amplified for everyone. Protocol 7 complete. Ownership verified. All legal documentation confirmed. Recording logged. Sir, you are cleared. It wasn't just confirmation, it was judgment. The jogger exhaled, a disbelieving laugh slipping out. All this for the man who owns the gate. The crowd shifted, phones tilted higher, some voices rising in outrage. They tried to cuff him at his own house. They called him a fraud. This is insane. The younger officer's face drained of color, his radio still open for dispatch to hear every word. Control, correction. Subject is verified. Repeat, verified resident, stand down. Too late. The world had already heard the first report. The damage was done. The man lowered his phone, eyes sweeping calmly across those who had mocked, accused, and dismissed him. He didn't need to shout. The truth now stood taller than any insult. His voice carried steady, clear enough for every camera, every witness. You called me a trespasser at the home I built. You called me a fraud at the gate that bears my name. Tell me, who doesn't belong here? The silence that followed was deafening. Even the woman who moments ago sneered, "Cry, baby," now took a step back, her face pale, her certainty collapsing into shame. The storm had broken, and its lightning spelled out one undeniable fact. He wasn't the intruder, he was the owner, the only owner. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was collapse. Authority, so loud seconds ago, cracked under the weight of 4 glowing words, owner profile verified. The younger officer's cuffs slipped from his hand, clattering against the pavement. The sound was small, but it carried farther than his voice ever could. He stammered, I didn't, we thought. His throat closed on the excuse. His partner's posture broke next. Shoulders that once squared now slumped, his eyes darting between the crowd and the gate, as if searching for an escape. He muttered under his breath, God, we screwed this up. The security guard, who had smacked the keypad with such certainty, stared at the panel like it had betrayed him. His lips moved soundlessly, red-faced, as if arguing with the machine might undo the truth. But the machine didn't lie. It never did. And then there was her, the woman in white. She shook her head, voice rising into panic, brittle and shrill. "No! No! This is a trick! He doesn't live here! He can't live here! Do you know what houses on this block cost? People like him?" But the crowd wasn't with her anymore. The neighbor on the balcony snapped back, her voice like a verdict. "People like him built this house. What did you build?" Gasps and nods rippled through the onlookers. The delivery driver turned his phone so his live stream audience could see the woman's paling face. "This lady's been mocking him the whole time," he narrated. "Turns out she's the trespasser of decency." Phones buzzed as notifications poured in comments, likes, streams going live. The jogger folded his arms, shaking his head. "Unbelievable. They tried to arrest the man who pays for this gate." The officers stepped back now, hands visible, palms open, not as enforcers but as men cornered by truth. One whispered to the other, "We'll get written up for this. Maybe worse." The security guard muttered, "I was just following procedure." But the words sounded hollow even to him. The woman's voice cracked as she tried again, weaker this time. "I was protecting the community." "No," the man at the gate said finally, his voice calm, sharp as steel. "You were protecting your prejudice." The line landed like a gavel. The crowd erupted not in chaos, but in clarity. Applause from the balcony. Shouts of, "That's right," from the sidewalk. The delivery driver's phone shook as his hands trembled with adrenaline. "The whole world's seeing this," he breathed. "Justice in real time." And in the middle of it all, the man hadn't raised his voice once. The collapse wasn't his, it was theirs. The cuffs still lay on the ground, cold metal glinting beneath the morning Sunday. The officers hovered in silence, their authority drained, their radios buzzing unanswered. The crowd pressed closer, sensing the tide had shifted. The man raised his phone again, his thumb steady, his voice calm. "Elena," he said, no louder than before. "Log this moment. Effective immediately terminate the entire gate security team. Remove access, revoke credentials, lock them out." Her voice came crisp, amplified through speaker for every witness. "Confirmed. Executing termination protocol now." The security guard's badge beeped once. Then again. A long tone followed, sharp and final. He looked down at the red light flashing across his scanner, his access dead. "Wait, no, this is a mistake," he stammered, shaking the badge as though it might wake again. It didn't. Gasps spread through the crowd. Phones zoomed in on the flashing red, catching the exact second authority evaporated. The woman in white stumbled back, her heels scraping against the pavement. You can't just fire people like that on the spot." The man's eyes cut toward her, unblinking. "You thought I was powerless. I am the system you invoked." The younger officer swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. Who are you?" The man didn't answer him directly. Instead, he spoke to the phone again. "Elena, notify legal. Ensure this incident is logged for audit. Full report with video evidence." "Already recording," came her reply. "Every second is archived." The taller officer rubbed a hand over his face, the weight of exposure sinking into his bones. He muttered to his partner, "We're finished. This is going viral." The neighbor on the balcony clapped once, slow and deliberate, her voice ringing like a verdict. "Justice. Finally." Applause rippled through the onlookers, not wild but certain, the sound of witnesses recognizing truth. The man let the moment settle before delivering the final blow. His gaze returned to the trembling guard. "You stood at the gate of my home and called me an intruder. Today, that ends. You no longer decide who belongs here." The guard's mouth opened, closed. No words came, only the echo of his fall. The delivery driver whispered into his stream, voice shaking with awe. "He just fired the whole team, right there, in front of everyone." No shouting, no chaos, just justice, precise and irreversible. The storm had spent itself, and now the reckoning stood. The gate, once locked against him, groaned as it swung open. Steel that had resisted minutes ago now moved in silence, obedient. The morning sun poured through the widening gap, gilding the path that led to the mansion beyond. He didn't hurry. He didn't need to. Every step carried the weight of revelation, calm, steady, inevitable. The woman in white stumbled back further, her voice shrill with panic. "This isn't over. People like you." But the crowd drowned her out. Applause, sharp and rising, cut across her words. The jogger shouted, "It is over. You lost." From the balcony, the neighbor called down, "The only trespasser here was your prejudice." The delivery driver turned his camera, catching the faces of the officers, the guard, the woman, all pale, all shrinking under the lens of truth. His voice trembled, but it carried. He didn't even shout, didn't need to. Silence did the work. The man paused just past the threshold, the open gate framing him. He turned not to gloat, not to rage, but to close the chapter. His eyes swept across the officers clutching their radios, the guard clutching his dead badge, the woman clutching excuses that no longer held weight. His voice was low, deliberate, but every syllable carved into the air. "You called me a trespasser in my own home. You called me a fraud at a gate built in my name. But dignity doesn't need to shout. It stands where it belongs." The words landed like stone, immovable. Phones captured them. Lives streamed them. Comments flooded faster than the moment itself could end. He turned then, shoulders squared, walking into the mansion. The gates closed behind him with a finality that felt like justice itself sealing the record. Silence lingered for a breath. Then the crowd erupted, not just clapping, but cheering, voices rising with something deeper than relief. It was vindication. It was the satisfaction of seeing arrogance undone, of watching prejudice collapse under the simplest truth. Ownership. The officers said nothing. The guard said nothing. The woman muttered once, then fell silent too, because nothing they could say would outlive the footage. Nothing they could excuse would erase the sight of him walking through gates they swore he didn't deserve. The delivery driver's live stream counter ticked upward, thousands watching, then tens of thousands. His final words before ending the stream mirrored the thought burning in every witness. He didn't fight. He didn't beg. He just proved. That's power. And so the story closed, not with a shout, but with a truth that outlasted every insult. Justice hadn't raised its voice. Justice had simply walked home.